November 13th, 1943. On board the USS Essex in the Philippine Sea. It's 3:47 in the morning. Aviation machinist's mate second class James Sweat is watching yet another F6F Hellcat fighter plane flip wildly off the carrier's deck and plunge into the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean. That's the third pilot they've lost this week alone. But these aren't deaths from battles with Japanese Zero fighters or from enemy anti-aircraft guns. No, these men are dying because their own fuel tanks are bursting into flames during night landings on the carrier. The numbers are truly devastating. Ever since October, Task Force 38 has seen 47 Hellcat pilots killed by these fuel vapor blasts during recovery operations on the carriers. Those self-sealing fuel tanks, which were meant to protect pilots from enemy bullets, are turning against them and causing their deaths instead. Every single rough landing, every time the tailhook snags that arresting wire, it sends a powerful jolt right through the entire fuel setup. The vapors catch fire in an instant. The cockpit turns into a raging fire pit before the pilot even has a chance to unbuckle his safety straps. Admiral Mark Mitcher has put a complete halt to all nighttime flying activities because of this. Without the ability to launch night fighters, the whole carrier group is essentially defenseless once the sun goes down. Japanese planes carrying torpedoes are taking full advantage of this weakness. Just last week, the USS Independence got hit by 2 torpedoes in a raid that happened at midnight. 73 sailors lost their lives in that attack. The ship just barely limped its way back to Pearl Harbor for repairs. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics has been trying to tackle this issue for a full 8 months now. Their proposed fix involves strengthening the brackets that hold the tanks in place, adding springs to dampen the impacts, and changing the pressure release on the filler caps. But none of it is making a difference. Pilots are still perishing. The fuel tanks keep detonating. What the high-ranking officers don't realize, what absolutely no one knows yet, is that a 24-year-old mechanic hailing from Terre Haute, Indiana, has been running his own secret tests down in Hangar Bay 3. James Sweat didn't even finish high school. He holds no degree in engineering, and he has zero official education in designing fuel systems. He's not supposed to be coming up with ideas like this. His job is to obey commands, tighten bolts, and stay out of the way. But Sweat has been paying close attention to the investigations after each crash. He's been examining the patterns of the burns, and he spotted something that all the experts overlooked. Something so straightforward, so basic, that when he eventually lays it out for the top brass, they'll charge him with deliberate tampering. They'll warn him about facing a court-martial. They'll point out that his concept breaks no fewer than 3 different Navy rules and could land him 20 years behind bars at Leavenworth. In just 3 hours from this moment, Sweat is about to sneak a Hellcat right off the flight deck. He's going to take off on a test flight that's completely against orders, right in the heart of an active war zone. And he's going to demonstrate that the Navy's entire understanding of fuel tank protection is completely mistaken. The F6F Hellcat came into active duty back in January of 1943, carrying with it a groundbreaking assurance. It was set to be the very first fighter based on carriers that could withstand hits in battle and still get its pilots back safely. The key to this was the self-sealing fuel tank. If a bullet pierced the tank, a unique rubber inner layer would close up the hole on its own. The Japanese Zero fighters lacked any similar safeguard. A quick spray from a Hellcat's machine guns could set a Zero ablaze in seconds. American pilots were surviving injuries that would doom their opponents. By the summer of 1943, the Hellcat was ruling the skies over the Pacific. The ratios of kills were climbing as high as 19-1. The pilots adored this plane. It was speedy, packed with heavy firepower, and almost impossible to take down in aerial dogfights. The Navy put in orders for 5,000 additional units. Then came the start of operations at night. Landing on a carrier has always been a high-risk endeavor. Pilots describe it as a crash that's under control, where you're smashing a 20,000-pound machine onto a deck that's rolling with the waves, coming in at 90 knots, and praying that the wire grabs your hook at the tail. In the daylight, pilots can spot the officer signaling for landing, gauge their incoming path, and make tweaks for how the carrier is shifting. But at night, they're essentially flying without sight, relying solely on a handful of faint lights and calls over the radio. The initial fuel tank blast happened on October 3, 1943. Lieutenant Robert Anderson executed a flawless night landing aboard the USS Lexington. His hook latched onto the number 3 wire. That abrupt slowdown triggered a surge of pressure through his fuel tanks. The vapors ignited right away. Anderson was gone before the firefighting team could even get to him. The Navy pinned it on a mistake by the pilot. They figured Anderson must have approached too quickly or hit the deck with too much force. So they instructed all pilots to come in more softly. Then, on October 14, 1943, Ensign Charles Murphy met the same fate in an identical blast on the USS Bunker Hill. Murphy's incoming path was spot on. His speed for landing matched the guidelines perfectly. October 22nd. Lieutenant James Fleming on the USS Enterprise. Same kind of explosion, same tragic end. October 29th. 2 pilots lost in a single night. One on the USS Essex and another on the USS Yorktown. The Bureau of Aeronautics called for an urgent probe. Their team of engineers pinpointed the issue. The slowdown from the arresting wire generates a kind of hydraulic pounding inside the fuel tanks. The fuel itself rushes ahead, then bounces back. This builds up a massive spike in pressure that breaks through the rubber lining meant to seal itself. Fuel vapors leak out into the open space within the tank. The tiniest spark, from built-up static, from metal scraping metal, or from the plane's electrical wiring, sets it all off. The Bureau's approach made sense on paper. Beef up the whole system. Put in tougher brackets for mounting to stop any shifting of the tanks. Add springs that cushion the jolts. Alter the valves for pressure relief to let out vapors more rapidly. They updated 200 planes with this new setup. November 6, 1943. The very first plane equipped with these changes blows up while landing. Lieutenant Richard Best is killed on the spot. The Admirals are in a panic. Admiral Meacher calls off all night fighter missions for an indefinite period. Lacking air protection after dark, the carrier groups are sitting ducks. Japanese subs have already taken out 2 destroyers. Planes dropping torpedoes strike whenever they want once night falls. Reports from intelligence suggest the Japanese are gathering their subs for a big, synchronized assault on the carriers under cover of darkness. The Navy's leading experts in fuel systems, folks with advanced degrees from places like MIT and Caltech, are completely baffled. They've experimented with everything imaginable. Tougher tanks, improved venting, better ways to soak up shocks. Nothing is solving it. The general agreement is straightforward. Self-sealing fuel tanks and running carrier ops at night just don't mix. The Navy is going to have to pick one or the other. Down in Hangar Bay 3 on the USS Essex, aviation machinist's mate second-class James Sweat isn't buying into that conclusion. He's been following the probes closely. He's been poring over the remains of the crashes, and he believes everyone is focusing on the incorrect aspect. James Sweat spent his childhood repairing tractors on the family farm in Indiana amid the hardships of the Great Depression. He had to leave school at 16 after his dad passed away, stepping up to provide for his mom and his 3 younger sisters. He got a job at an auto shop in Terre Haute, earning a local reputation as the young guy who could mend just about anything. When the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, Sweat signed up the very next day. The Navy turned him down for pilot training. Without a high school diploma, he couldn't become an officer. They assigned him as a mechanic. Sweat didn't grumble about it. He thrived on working with planes. The F6F Hellcat was the most intricate piece of machinery he'd ever laid hands on. It had 9 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, systems for hydraulics, electrics, and armaments. He dove into every manual available. He signed up for every class he could. In just 6 months, he could take apart and put back together a Hellcat engine with his eyes closed. But Sweat went beyond just turning tools. He observed failures in detail. While other mechanics might see a faulty component, Sweat recognized a repeating issue. When the engineers suggested fixes, Sweat would run through them in his mind, comparing them to what he'd witnessed firsthand in actual conditions. On the night of November 12, 1943, Sweat is put on duty for investigating a crash. Lieutenant William Edwards has just perished in yet another fuel tank detonation. Sweat looks over the debris in the hangar bay. The fuel tanks are split open in the exact same manner as all the previous ones. The brackets for mounting, beefed up with the Navy's latest adjustments, are still holding strong. The springs for dampening are unharmed. The valves for pressure relief operated flawlessly. Sweat gazes at the charred tanks for a solid 3 hours. Then he spots it. The blast started at the upper part of the tank, not down below. The marks from the fire indicate the flames moved downward, but fuel weighs more than air. It gathers at the tank's base. If that hydraulic pounding was causing fuel to splash around and generate dangerous vapors, the explosion ought to begin at the bottom, where the fuel and air blend together. Unless the real trouble isn't with the fuel itself at all. Sweat snatches a flashlight and squeezes into the wreckage. He checks the inside of the tank. The rubber lining for self-sealing is fine at the bottom, but up top, close to the cap for filling, the rubber is ripped to pieces. Not scorched, but shredded, pulled apart by some physical force prior to the fire even igniting. Sweat grasps what's truly going on. The engineers have been addressing the incorrect issue. That hydraulic pounding isn't producing hazardous vapors by sloshing the liquid fuel around. It's generating a vacuum instead. When the plane slows down so sharply, the fuel rushes forward, creating an empty area at the tank's rear. Nature can't stand a vacuum. Air floods in through the filler cap to occupy that space. But the rubber lining, built to be pliable for sealing, gets drawn inward by the vacuum force. It rips apart, and as it rips, it builds up static electricity. That spark then sets off the fuel vapors that are always there in a tank that's not completely full. The Navy's fixes, like making the tanks stronger, actually worsen the situation. More rigid tanks lead to even fiercer vacuum pulls. Improved valves for relief vent the vapors quicker, which creates even stronger vacuums. Sweat figures out the solution, but no one's going to pay attention to a mechanic who didn't even graduate high school. November 13th, 1943, in Hangar Bay 3. Sweat can't get any rest. He keeps picturing Lieutenant Edwards trapped and burning in his cockpit. He mulls over the fix. It's so straightforward, so clear. Put something in the fuel tank's empty area that stops a vacuum from forming. Something neutral that doesn't catch fire. Something that swells and shrinks along with the fuel amount. Foam rubber. If you cover the tank's interior with open cell foam rubber, it will absorb the fuel like a sponge when the tank is topped off. As the fuel gets used up in flight, the foam lets it out slowly. But the crucial part is that the foam occupies the vacant space. No vacant space means no vacuum. No vacuum means no ripping of the self-sealing liner. No ripping means no static spark. The foam would tack on perhaps 5 pounds to each tank. It wouldn't hurt how the plane flies. It wouldn't call for any big changes to the structure. You could add it in about an hour. Sweat locates Chief Petty Officer Michael Torres in the office for maintenance. Torres has been involved in naval aviation for 15 years. He has faith in Sweat's gut feelings. "Chief, I need some foam rubber, around 6 cubic feet, and I need to get into a Hellcat's fuel setup." Torres eyes him. "What's this for?" "I understand why the tanks are blowing up, and I know how to stop it. The Bureau of Aeronautics has 50 engineers on this. They're searching in the wrong spot." Torres ponders it. He's witnessed Sweat tackle tough problems in the past. "Lay it out for me." They labor all through the night in a secluded corner of the hangar bay. Sweat describes his theory about the vacuum. He points out the burn patterns from the crash probes to Torres. He shows it with a bucket full of water and a sheet of rubber. How the vacuum shreds the lining. Torres buys into it. We have to put this to the test. I need the Hellcat, and I need to simulate a full-speed landing with the arresting wire. That's out of the question. We can't grab a plane without getting the okay. Then we ask for the okay. From whom? The air boss, the captain? They'll dismiss us outright. You're just a machinist's mate second class. You're not an engineer. Sweat realizes Torres is spot on. The Navy runs on a strict chain of command. Ideas come from above, not below. An enlisted mechanic doesn't dictate to admirals how fuel systems should be built. What if we go ahead anyway? Sweat suggests softly. Go ahead with what? Sneak a Hellcat tonight. Put in the foam. Do a test landing. If it succeeds, we have evidence. If not, I'll face the court-martial. Torres gazes at him. That's totally against the law. You'd be taking a Navy plane without permission. That's 20 years at Leavenworth. Possibly even execution by firing squad. How many additional pilots will die as we wait for approval? Torres recalls Lieutenant Edwards. He thinks about the 73 sailors who perished on the Independence, about the Japanese submarines lurking around the carrier group, biding their time until nightfall. I'll fetch the foam rubber, Torres decides. You prepare the Hellcat. We'll test it at first light. November 13th, 1943. Sweat and Torres hustle in the dim hours before dawn. They've picked Hellcat number 42, a backup plane not lined up for the morning's flights. Taking foam from the ship's mattresses, sliced into long pieces and treated with stuff to resist fire, they line the insides of both fuel tanks. The job takes 40 minutes. They skip any tests on the ground. They don't bother with figuring out equations. They scarcely finish closing the panels for access before the day's flying starts. I'll take it up, Torres offers. No, this is my concept, my risk. You're no pilot. I've logged 30 hours in the seat, next to one. I can handle landing this bird. Torres knows the whole thing is crazy, but time is running out. Keep it brief. One landing, then we report this to the captain. Sweat gets into the cockpit. The crew on the flight deck is gearing up for the morning's activities. Amid all the planes being shuffled around, one extra Hellcat moving to the launch catapult doesn't raise any flags. Sweat's pulse is racing. He's never taken off from a carrier, never brought one down on deck. He's on the verge of trying the riskiest move in Navy flying with a fuel system change that's completely unapproved. The officer for catapult signals him ahead. Sweat moves up to the catapult. The team attaches the holdback. Sweat goes through the pre-flight list from recall. Flaps lowered. Mixture set rich. Propeller pitched full ahead. Canopy secured. The catapult launches. The force pushes Sweat hard against his seat. 3 seconds pass and he's in the air, pulling away from the Essex at 200 knots. For 10 minutes, Sweat loops around the carrier group. He uses up fuel, dropping the tanks to half capacity, matching the level that triggered the blasts. His hands tremble. He's broken about 6 rules worthy of court-martial in the past hour. If this fails, his time in the Navy is done. He sets up for the landing path. The officer signaling guides him down. Sweat reduces power, lowers flaps, tweaks his descent. The deck of the carrier looms large. His wheels hit hard. His hook snags the number 2 wire. The slowdown is brutal. From 90 knots to 0 in 2 seconds. Sweat senses the fuel shifting forward in the tanks. He braces for the blast. Nothing occurs. He's still breathing. The tanks hold. The foam did its job. Sweat rolls to the spot for parking and cuts the engine. As he steps out from the cockpit, he spots Commander David McCampbell, who leads the air group, marching over the flight deck with 6 officers trailing him. McCampbell's face is flushed red with fury. What in the world do you think you're up to? The showdown unfolds right on the flight deck, with 200 sailors looking on. Sir, let me clarify. Clarify what? You took a Navy plane without permission. You ran a flight op that's not authorized. You put this whole carrier group at risk. Torres moves up. Sir, if you'll hear us out, I'll lock you both up in minutes. The area fills with noise. Other officers yell. The deck team pauses their tasks to observe. Someone calls for the master-at-arms. Sweat attempts to describe the foam, the vacuum idea, but McCampbell refuses to listen. Then Captain Ralph Waller, in command of the Essex, shows up on the flight deck. Commander McCampbell, what's happening here? McCampbell lays it out. Unauthorized takeoff, plane taken illicitly, breach of roughly 40 Navy rules. Waller faces Sweat. Why did you do it? Sweat spells out the whole thing. The theory on vacuum, the ripped rubber linings, the foam fix, the successful test landing he just pulled off. The flight deck falls quiet. Waller eyes the Hellcat. You altered the fuel tanks. Yes, sir. Without getting approval. Yes, sir. And you just did a landing at full speed with tanks at half full. Yes, sir. Waller approaches the Hellcat. He checks the panels for fuel tank access. He summons the officer in charge of engineering on the ship. They look over how the foam was put in. 5 minutes go by, and Waller turns to Sweat again. Machinist's mate Sweat. You're heading either to jail or to rescuing this fleet. We're about to discover which one. Commander McCampbell, halt all flying ops. Connect me to the Bureau of Aeronautics via radio and prepare 10 additional Hellcats for the same change. If stories like this captivate you, tales of everyday folks who altered the path of history with their bravery and clever thinking, think about subscribing to Last Words. We deliver the hidden accounts of heroes who wouldn't settle for what's deemed impossible. Tap that subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications so you won't miss any episode. The Bureau of Aeronautics gets back within hours. The message from Captain Ralph Waller about how an enlisted mechanic might have cracked the fuel tank explosion riddle reaches Admiral John McCain, who commands Task Force 38. McCain directs that testing begin right away. November 14th, 1943, on the USS Essex, they run supervised trials. 6 Hellcats get the foam lining in their fuel tanks. 6 others keep the regular tanks as controls. Every plane does 10 landings with the arresting wire, at different amounts of fuel, various speeds on approach, and in assorted conditions of the sea. The pilots who test them push boundaries. Rough touchdowns, catches that are off to the side, the strongest possible slowdowns. The outcomes are definitive. Not a single explosion in the planes with foam, but 2 blasts in the control set. Yet the top Navy officials stay doubtful. Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman, who oversees development in carrier aviation, travels out to the Essex himself to question Sweat. You're claiming that 50 engineers trained at MIT overlooked what a farm kid from Indiana noticed? I'm no engineer, sir. Perhaps that's the reason I caught it. I wasn't buried in formulas. I was examining the actual debris. Sherman reviews the data from the tests. He talks to the pilots who flew them. He checks the foam setup. At last, he poses the key question. What's the effect on operations? In terms of weight, how it flies, upkeep. Sweat has his responses prepared. 5 pounds for each tank. It's barely noticeable. No drop in flying performance during the tests. Time to install, 45 minutes per plane. Cost of materials, $8. Sherman reaches his verdict. We're rolling this out across the entire fleet. Every Hellcat in the Pacific gets updated in 2 weeks. But there's an obstacle. The Navy lacks sufficient foam rubber. The stuff is scarce. Much of it is used for life preservers and gear that floats. Sherman orders every bit of appropriate foam in the Pacific area. It's still short. Then an idea comes up about mattresses. Each vessel has hundreds of them. The foam within, if coated with fire-resistant treatment, could serve. In 72 hours, sailors throughout the Pacific Fleet are slicing open mattresses. They're resting on plain springs while their mattress foam is saving the lives of pilots. No one gripes. Everyone has lost someone to a fuel tank blast. The update effort turns into the quickest overhaul of aircraft in the history of the Navy. By November 30th, 1943, more than 800 Hellcats have tanks lined with foam. Admiral Mitcher ends the prohibition on ops at night. December 4th, 1943. The initial trial in battle. Task Force 38 is active close to the Gilbert Islands. Japanese scouts have pinpointed the carrier group. At 20:30 hours, radar detects aircraft coming in. 12 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers dropping torpedoes, heading from the northwest. 4 Hellcats with the full mods take off for interception at night. The pilots are Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare, Lieutenant Alex Vrachu, Ensign Warren Scone, and Ensign John Ballantyne. O'Hare guides the group through the utter darkness of the sky. They're operating without any lights, directed only by radar instructions from the Essex. The Japanese bombers are skimming the waves to dodge radar. At 2:47 hours, O'Hare sees the first Betty, a shadowy form against the even darker sea. He plunges down, starts shooting at 300 yards. His tracer rounds stitch across the bomber's body. The Betty detonates, tumbling into the waves. Vrachu takes down the second bomber. Scone gets the third. The night air lights up with tracers and blasts. The Japanese group scatters, but O'Hare's Hellcat sustains hits. A gunner on a Betty's tail lands shots on his left wing and fuel tank. Fuel pours from the damaged tank. The lining that seals itself does what it's supposed to. The flow eases, then halts. But O'Hare has dropped 50 gallons. He's nearly out of fuel. He turns back toward the Essex. The carrier is heaving in rough waves. O'Hare sets up his approach, battling winds from the side and low fuel. His wheels pound the deck. His hook grabs the wire. The fierce slowdown ripples a shock through his tanks, which are half empty. Prior to Sweat's change, O'Hare would have been killed right then. His tanks would have gone up just like Lieutenant Anderson's, just like Lieutenant Edwards's. But instead, O'Hare steps out unharmed. The foam took the impact. No vacuum developed, no rubber ripped, no spark flared. The results from the fight are telling. In December of 1943, carrier groups with night fighters downed 47 Japanese planes with not one loss from fuel tank blasts. In January of 1944, that climbs to 63 Japanese planes taken out. The Japanese take note. Documents seized show their bewilderment. Their scout reports call American night fighters unbreakable against battle damage and able to keep going without breaking down mechanically. Japanese pilots start steering clear of attacking carrier groups at night altogether. The shift in strategy is huge. Without the danger of torpedo strikes after dark, American carrier groups can push forward more boldly. They can get close enough to hit islands held by the Japanese. They can hold their spots during ops that last multiple days without pulling back to safer areas when the sun sets. The ratios of kills paint the picture. Before tanks with foam lining, 19-1 favoring American pilots in ops during the day. But night ops were stopped because of the explosion danger. After tanks with foam lining, 23-1 in day ops, 31-1 in night ops. Japanese casualties soar. American ones drop sharply. By February of 1944, the change is standard on every Navy plane based on carriers. Not only Hellcats, but also Corsairs, Avengers, and Helldivers as well. The method of foam lining gets adjusted for tanks and bombers, then for planes that transport. A report from German Luftwaffe intelligence, captured post-war, talks about the American breakthrough. The foe has created a fuel tank setup that makes their planes almost proof against blowing up during carrier activities. Our efforts to copy this setup have not succeeded. The technical edge the Americans have in aviation safety puts our side at a major strategic drawback. In March of 1944, Lieutenant Alex Vraciu, one of those pilots from the first combat mission at night, finds Sweat in the maintenance area on the Essex. Vraciu has just earned ace status with 19 kills confirmed. "I heard you're the one who sorted out the fuel tanks," Vraciu tells him. Sweat gives a nod. "I got hit last week. Fuel tank took a bullet. Made it back to the carrier running on empty. Hit the deck rough. Walked off without a mark." Vraciu offers his hand. "Thanks to you, I'm still here. Thanks to you, plenty of guys are still here." Sweat takes the handshake. He struggles for words. "How many pilots do you figure you've kept alive?" Vraciu inquires. Sweat never tallied it up. He was simply aiming to resolve a flaw. James Sweat's tale shows us that fresh ideas often emerge from surprising sources, from individuals who view challenges in new ways because they're free from standard approaches. If you're eager for more tales like this one, accounts of regular people who shifted history's direction, kindly like this video and pass it along to someone who values true heroes. Your backing assists us in keeping these overlooked stories alive. From November of 1943 through August of 1945, fuel tanks lined with foam averted an estimated 394 explosions in carrier planes. That's 394 pilots who returned home in one piece. 394 families spare the news of their son's passing. 394 men who continue to fly additional sorties, down more foe planes, aid more ops on the ground. The Navy manufactured 12,275 F6F Hellcats in World War II. Each one produced after December of 1943 featured fuel tanks lined with foam, drawing from Sweat's concept. The update also went into 10,000 F4U Corsairs, 9,839 TBF Avengers, and 7,040 SB-2C Helldivers, for a total of 39,703 planes safeguarded. But James Sweat never got any public acclaim during the war years. The Navy kept the foam lining method under wraps as confidential, worried that if the Japanese grasped it, they could devise ways to counter it. Sweat's name doesn't show up in any official records released prior to 1990. He got bumped up to Chief Petty Officer in January of 1944. He stayed on the Essex until the close of the war, looking after planes, teaching fresh mechanics, and subtly adding enhancements that preserved lives. When fellow sailors quizzed him on his part in fixing the fuel tanks, he brushed off the praise. "Lots of folks pieced it together," he'd respond. "I just got fortunate." After the war wrapped up, Sweat headed back to Terre Haute. He started a modest shop for auto repairs. He wed his sweetheart from high school, Mary Catherine Sullivan. They brought up 4 kids. He seldom spoke of his time in the Navy. His children had no clue about how he saved hundreds of pilots until a historian from the Navy found him in 1991. The principle of fuel tanks lined with foam that Sweat pioneered remains in use even now. Today's aircraft, both for the military and for civilians, employ foam barriers in fuel tanks to stop explosions in crashes. The Federal Aviation Administration requires systems based on foam to suppress explosions in fuel tanks on commercial planes. Race cars in Formula One use comparable tech. Each time you step onto an airliner, you're shielded by a safety feature that links back to a 24-year-old mechanic who wouldn't stand for good men dying needlessly. In 1993, the Navy presented Sweat with the Legion of Merit, 48 years after the fact. The award's wording states, "For exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services and achievements whose innovation in fuel system safety directly resulted in the preservation of hundreds of lives and contributed significantly to the success of naval aviation operations in the Pacific Theater." Sweat went to the event at the Pentagon. He was 74 years old. When journalists asked how it felt to get recognition at last, he replied, "I was just doing my job. The real heroes are the pilots who flew those missions. I just made sure they could come home." James Sweat passed away in 2009 at the age of 90. His notice in the Terre Haute Tribune Star touched on his Navy days in the closing paragraph. Most who read it had no notion that the unassuming mechanic who'd repaired their vehicles for 50 years had rescued hundreds of lives. The takeaway from James Sweat's account isn't about being a genius or having fancy degrees or advanced schooling. It's about viewing issues with clarity, mustering the bravery to step up, and realizing that the biggest breakthroughs sometimes come from those not expected to hold the solutions, yet who won't accept that no solutions are out there. At times, the individual who transforms it all is the one no one saw coming. At times, the answer is basic, and at times, defying the rules is the sole path to preserving lives. November 13th, 1943. It's aboard the USS Essex, out in the Philippine Sea. The time is 3:47 hours. Aviation machinist mate second class James Sweat is witnessing another F6F Hellcat tumble end over end from the carrier deck and sink into the dark Pacific Ocean below. This marks the third pilot they've lost just this week. These tragedies aren't from clashes with Japanese Zero planes or from flak coming up from the ground. Instead, these pilots are perishing because their fuel tanks are catching fire and exploding right as they attempt night landings back on the ship. The toll has been heartbreaking. Starting from October, Task Force 38 has suffered 47 Hellcat pilots killed due to these blasts of fuel vapor happening while planes are being recovered on the carriers. The self-sealing fuel tanks, which were created to protect pilots against bullets from enemies, are now the very thing taking their lives. With every tough touchdown, every time the hook grabs the arresting cable, a massive jolt travels straight through the fuel setup. Vapors ignite instantly. The cockpit transforms into a blazing furnace before the pilot can even loosen his straps. Admiral Mark Mitcher has ordered a full stop to all flights after dark. Lacking fighters that can operate at night, the entire carrier group becomes exposed once the light fades. Japanese bombers loaded with torpedoes are making the most of this gap. Only last week, the USS Independence absorbed 2 torpedoes in an attack that struck at midnight. 73 crew members perished. The vessel hardly managed to return to Pearl Harbor. For 8 full months, the Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics has been grappling with this crisis. They came up with ideas like bolstering the brackets holding the tanks, installing springs to cushion shocks, and tweaking the filler caps for better pressure release. Yet it changes nothing. More pilots die. The explosions continue. The Admirals have no idea, and truly nobody does, that a 24-year-old mechanic originally from Terre Haute, Indiana, has been carrying out his own secret trials in Hangar Bay 3. James Sweat never completed high school. He lacks any engineering credentials or official schooling in fuel system work. No one expects him to devise fixes. His role is to take orders, work with tools, and keep quiet. Still, Sweat has closely followed every crash review. He's examined the scorch marks in detail, and he's discovered an oversight that escaped the specialists. It's something incredibly straightforward, so basic, that when he finally shares it with the leaders, they'll accuse him of trying to damage equipment. They'll talk about court-martial. They'll remind him his suggestion goes against 3 distinct Navy rules and might earn him 20 years in Leavenworth. Just 3 hours ahead, Sweat plans to take a Hellcat directly from the deck without permission. He'll fly a forbidden test right in a war zone, proving the Navy has it all backward on fuel tank protection. The F6F Hellcat began serving in January of 1943 with a bold new claim. It would be the premier carrier-based fighter able to take hits in combat and return pilots safely. The breakthrough came from self-sealing fuel tanks. A bullet hole would trigger a special rubber layer to close it automatically. Zeros from Japan had no equivalent. One good hit from a Hellcat could turn a zero into flames. Pilots from America survived wounds that ended their foes. Come summer 1943, Hellcats were owning Pacific battles. Kill ratios hit 19-1. Pilots cherished the plane. It had speed, strong weapons, and seemed nearly unbreakable in fights. The Navy placed orders for 5,000 extra. Then, night flights started. Carrier landings are inherently risky. Pilots refer to it as a crash you manage, dropping a 20,000-pound machine onto a deck, moving with waves at 90 knots, trusting the hook catches a wire. By day, pilots spot the landing officer, assess their path, correct for the ship's motion. At night, it's blind flying, depending on sparse lights and voice guidance. The first explosion of a fuel tank happened October 3, 1943. Lieutenant Robert Anderson performed a perfect night landing on USS Lexington. His hook secured the third wire. The sharp stop created pressure surges in his tanks. Vapors lit up. Anderson perished before rescuers arrived. The Navy called it pilot mistake. They said he came in too hot or too hard. Pilots were told to ease approaches. October 14, 1943. Ensign Charles Murphy suffered the same in a matching blast aboard USS Bunker Hill. His path was ideal. Speed was exact. October 22nd. Lieutenant James Fleming, USS Enterprise. Identical blast, identical outcome. October 29th. 2 in one night on USS Essex and USS Yorktown. The Bureau of Aeronautics launched an urgent review. Engineers pinpointed the hydraulic hammer from the wire stop. Fuel surges forward, then back, spiking pressure that tears the sealing rubber. Vapors escape. Sparks from static or contacts ignite them. Their fix seemed reasonable. Strengthen it all. Tougher mounts to hold tanks steady. Springs to soak up jolts. Better valves to release vapors fast. 200 planes got updates. November 6, 1943. The initial updated plane explodes on landing. Lieutenant Richard Best dies immediately. Admirals grow frantic. Admiral Mitcher bans night fighters indefinitely. No dark cover leaves carriers open. Japanese subs sank 2 destroyers already. Torpedo planes hit freely at night. Intel says Japan is building subs for a major night strike on carriers. Top fuel experts with MIT and Caltech degrees are stuck. They've tested stronger builds, better vents, shock absorbers. No success. Consensus forms. Self-sealing tanks clash with night carrier work. One must go. In Hangar Bay 3 on USS Essex, machinist's mate second-class James Sweat disagrees. He's tracked reviews, studied wrecks, thinks focus is misplaced. James Sweat grew up mending farm tractors in Indiana through the Depression. Dropped school at 16 after his father died, supporting mom and 3 sisters. Worked at a Terre Haute garage, known as the guy fixing anything. Enlisted day after Pearl Harbor. Navy rejected pilot role, no diploma for officer path. Made him mechanic. Sweat accepted it. Loved aircraft work. F6F Hellcat was the toughest machine he'd handled. 9 cylinders, 2,000 horsepower, complex systems. Read every guide. Took all courses. Soon rebuilt engines blindfolded. But he saw beyond repairs. Noticed failure trends. Mentally checked engineer ideas against real wrecks. November 12th night, 1943, Sweat on crash duty. Lieutenant William Edwards dies in another blast. Sweat inspects debris in hangar. Tanks ruptured same as before. Updated brackets intact. Springs fine. Valves worked. Stairs 3 hours. Notices blast began top of tank, not bottom. Burns spread down, but fuel sinks low. If hammer sloshed fuel creating vapor, blast should start bottom where mix occurs, unless fuel isn't the issue. Flashlight in hand crawls inside. Bottom rubber intact, top near filler shredded mechanically before fire. Realizes engineers wrong. Hammer creates vacuum, not vapor from slosh. Deceleration surges fuel forward, empties rear. Air rushes in filler. Flexible rubber sucked in, tears. Tear makes static spark. Ignites ever-present vaporous in partial tanks. Navy fixes worsen it. Stronger tanks, bigger vacuums. Faster vents, stronger pulls. Swept nose fix, but no one listens to diploma-less mechanic. November 13th, 1943. Hangar Bay 3. Swept sleepless. Sees Edwards burning. Solution simple. Fill space to block vacuum. Inert, non-burning, adjusts with fuel. Open cell foam rubber. Lines tank interior. Soaks fuel when full. Releases as used. Key. Fills voids. No voids, no vacuum. No vacuum, no tear. No tear, no spark. Adds 5 pounds per tank. No flight impact. No major changes. 1 hour retrofit. Finds Chief Petty Officer Michael Torres in maintenance. Torres, 15 years in aviation, trusts sweat. Chief, needs 6 cubic feet foam rubber, access to Hellcat fuel. For what? Know why explosions, how to stop. Bureau has 50 engineers, wrong place. Torres seen sweat succeed. Explain. Night work in hangar corner. Sweat details vacuum, shows patterns. Demos with water bucket and rubber. Vacuum tears lining. Torres convinced. Must test. Need Hellcat, hard arrested landing. Impossible without orders. Get orders? Air boss, captain laugh. You're second class, not engineer. Sweat knows hierarchy. Ideas top down. Enlisted don't advise admirals. What if we do it? Quietly. Take Hellcat tonight. Add foam. Test landing. Works. Proof. Fails. My court-martial. Torres. Illegal. Stealing aircraft. 20 years Leavenworth. Maybe worse. How many more die waiting? Torres recalls Edwards. 73 on Independence. Subs waiting dark. Gets foam. You ready plane. Dawn test. November 13th. Pre-dawn rush. Choose reserve Hellcat 42. Mattress foam from stores. Cut strips. Fire retardant treated. Line both tanks. 40 minutes. No ground tests. Calculations. Close panels as ops start. Torres. I'll fly. No, my idea. My fault. Not pilot. 30 hours co-pilot. Can land. Torres. Insane but no time. Quick. 1 landing then captain. Sweat cockpit. Deck crew morning prep. Chaos hides 1 more Hellcat to catapult. Heart racing. First carrier launch. Landing. Riskiest maneuver with unauthorized mod. Catapult officer signals. Advances. Hooks holdback. Checklist memory. Flaps down. Rich mixture. Full prop. Canopy locked. Fires. Slammed back. 3 seconds airborne. 200 knots away from Essex. 10 minutes circle group. Burn fuel to half. Explosion level. Shaking. 6 court-martials committed. Fail. Career ends. Lines approach. Signal officer guides. Power cut. Flaps. Angle adjust. Deck rises. Wheels slam. Hook number 2 wire. Violent stop. 90 to 02 seconds. Fuel surges. Weights blast. None. Alive. Tanks good. Foam success. Taxis parking. Shuts down. Climbing out sees Commander David McCampbell, Air Group Leader, approaching angry with 6 officers. Face furious. What are you doing? Deck confrontation. 200 watching. Sir, explain. You stole aircraft. Unauthorized op. Endangered group. Torres. Sir, listen. Both brig soon. Shouts erupt. Deck stops. Master-at-arms called. Sweat tries foam, vacuum, but ignored. Captain Raoul Waller arrives. Situation? Unauthorized flight. Stolen plane. 40 regs broken. Waller to Sweat. Why? Explains vacuum, torn linings, foam, successful hard landing half fuel. Deck silent. Waller. Modified tanks? Yes, sir. Unauthorized? Yes. Full arrested half full? Yes. Inspect panels with engineer. 5 minutes. Waller. Sweat. Prison or save fleet? We'll see. McCampbell. Stop ops. Radio Bureau. Ready 10 more Hellcats mod. Stories of ordinary courage changing history fascinate? Subscribe. Last words. Untold heroes rejecting impossible. Subscribe. Bell on. Never miss. Bureau responds hours. Waller's message enlisted solved explosions reaches Admiral John McCain, Task Force 38 Commander. Orders tests now. November 14th, 1943. USS Essex trials. 6 Hellcats foam-lined. 6 standard controls. Each 10 arrested landings, varied fuel, speeds, seas. Pilots push hard landings, off catches, max stops. Results clear. No explosions, foam planes. 2 in controls. Brass skeptical. Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman, carrier dev head, flies to Essex, questions Sweat. 50 MIT engineers miss what Indiana farm boys saw? Not engineers, sir. Maybe why? Saw wreckage, not equations. Sherman checks data, pilot interviews, foam. Asks ops impact, weight, flight, maintenance. Sweat ready. 5 pounds tank, negligible. No performance loss tests. 45 minutes install, $8 materials. Sherman, fleet-wide. Every Pacific Hellcat, 2 weeks. Foam shortage, mostly for live gear. Sherman takes all Pacific foam. Not enough. Idea, mattresses. Ships have hundreds. Treated foam works. 72 hours, fleet sailors cut mattresses. Sleep on springs while foam saves pilots. No complaints. All no explosion victims. Fastest retrofit, Navy history. November 30th, 1943. 800 plus Hellcats foam tanks. Mitchell lifts night ban. December 4th, 1943. First combat. Task Force 38, Gilbert Islands. Japanese locate group. 20-30 hours, radar incoming. 12 G4M Betty torpedo bombers, northwest. 4 foam Hellcats, night intercept. Pilots, Lieutenant Commander Edward O'Hare, Lieutenant Alex Vrachu, Ensign Warren Scahn, Ensign John Ballantyne. O'Hare leads Black Sky. No lights. Essex radar guide. Betty's low waves evade detection. 2:47 hours, O'Hare spots first Betty shadow on water. Dives, fires 300 yards. Tracers hit fuselage. Betty explodes. Ocean crash. Vrachu second, Scahn third. Sky tracers explosions. Formation breaks. O'Hare hit. Betty tail gunner wing tank. Fuel streams. Sealing works. Leak stops. Lost 50 gallons. Fumes. Back Essex heavy seas. Approach crosswinds. Low fuel. Wheel slam. Hook wire. Shock half tanks. Before mud, instant death like Anderson, Edwards. Instead unharmed. Foam absorbed, no vacuum, no tear, no spark. Combat proves. December 1943. Night fighter groups down 47 Japanese Zero fuel losses. January 1944. 63. Japanese note. Captured docks confusion. Reports American night fighters damage immune. No failures. Japanese avoid night carrier attacks. Impact massive. No night torpedo threat. Carriers aggressive. Close Japanese islands. Hold multi-day ops. No sunset retreat. Kill ratios. Pre-foam 19, 1 day, night suspended. Post-foam 23, 1 day, 31, 1 night. Japanese losses rise. American fall. February 1944. Standard all-carrier planes. Hellcats, Corsairs, Avengers, Helldivers. Foam-adapted bombers, transports. Captured German report. Enemy tank system near explosion. Immune carrier ops. Replication failed. American superiority disadvantages. March 1944. Lieutenant Alex Vraciu, first night mission pilot, finds swept Essex maintenance. 19 kills, ace. Heard you fix tanks. Nod. Hit last week tank. Back fumes hard deck. Clean. Handshake. You alive because you. Many guys. Sweat speechless. How many saved? Vraciu. Sweat never counted. Just fix problem. Sweat story. Innovation unexpected. Unconstrained thinking. More such stories, ordinary history changers? Like, share, hero appreciators. Support Light's forgotten stories. November 1943 to August 1945. Foam tanks prevented estimated 394 explosions carrier planes. 394 pilots home. 394 families no death notice. 394 more missions. Enemy downs. Ground support. Navy built 12,275 F6F Hellcats war. All post-December 1943. Foam-lined sweat design. Also 10,000 F4U Corsairs. 9,839 TBF Avengers. 7,040 SB-2C Helldivers. Total 39,703 protected. Sweat no war recognition. Navy classified foam confidential. Fear Japanese countermeasures. Name absent pre-1990 histories. Promoted Chief Petty Officer January 1944. Essex till war end. Maintain planes, train mechanics, quiet life-saving improvements. Asked role, deflect. Many figured, I lucky. Post-war Terre Haute. Small auto shop. Married high school love Mary Catherine Sullivan. 4 children. Rarely mentioned service. Kids unaware till Navy historian 1991. Sweat pioneered foam principle used today. Modern military civilian planes foam baffles crash explosion prevention. FAA mandates foam suppression commercial tanks. Formula One cars similar. Boarding airliner protected by system back to 24-year-old mechanic refusing needless deaths. 1993. Navy Legion of Merit 48 years late. Citation. Exceptionally meritorious outstanding services innovation, fuel safety, preserved hundreds lives, significant Pacific naval aviation success. Pentagon Ceremony 74. Reporters' recognition feel? Just job. Real heroes, pilots flew. I ensured homecoming. James Sweat died 2009, 90 years. Terre Haute Tribune Star, obituary. Navy mention last paragraph. Readers unaware, quiet 50-year mechanic saved hundreds. Sweat lesson. Not genius credentials education. Clear seeing, action, courage, innovations from unexpected, refusing no answers. Changer, sometimes nobody expected. Solution simple, sometimes rules broken, save lives.